to establish by proof or competent evidence. Welcome back to this week's episode of Substantiate. I'm joined today by the amazing Ken Davidoff. He's a writer, and he writes about the New York Yankees for the New York Post, and is a frequent guest on the Pinstripe Pod. How are you today, Ken?
I'm okay, William. How about you?
Yeah, definitely a tough few weeks since the Yankees lost. So today we're implementing a new short segment, and I'm just going to ask you a short question so the listeners can get to know you a little better. So if you could be the assistant of any one person, I guess in history, who would it be?
Wow, in history. I would say, I'm reading a biography of Leonardo da Vinci right now. So I'll say Leonardo da Vinci because I'm sure he had some really exciting opportunities professionally and had very interesting personal life as well.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so in today's episode, we're talking about some Yankees players in sort of a survivor format. So the way it's going to work today, we have 10 players on the Yankees selected, and we're going to work through the individual part of survivor and kind of play out who's going to win a challenge and vote someone off and potentially seek out some alliances. And before we begin, if you're listening to this episode, make sure to follow at substantiatepod on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and check out our website, www.substantiatepod.com. And the best way to support this podcast is to please share this with a friend or family member. All right, so our 10 players that will be, I guess, playing today are Garrett Cole, Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, Luke Voit, DJ LeMahieu, Aroldis Chapman, Gleyber Torres, Gary Sanchez, Clint Frazier, and Gio Urshela. Starting it off with an individual challenge, let's say that this challenge has endurance and balance. Who out of these players do you think is going to come out on top?
From the 10 we mentioned, William, I would say Aroldis Chapman because Aroldis Chapman is, in my opinion, the best athlete of this group. And I feel like he could run a marathon if he trained for it. Just if you watch him pitch, there's just he has such explosiveness to him, and I feel like he could certainly balance whatever he needed to.
Yeah, definitely. And who do you think are going to be some of the worst players in this challenge? Who's going to be out first?
I would say Gleyber Torres. I would say Gary Sanchez. Those two stand out the most to me initially.
So now we're walking into tribal council, and Aroldis Chapman's got immunity, so you can't vote him out. And so we're looking at Gleyber, and you said Sanchez as looking at maybe not so much as threats. So what kinds of alliances are we starting to see between these players?
Well, these guys all get along pretty well, so I wouldn't see, too many factions breaking out. Oftentimes pitchers will associate together because they have more in common. So Cole and Chapman, and then Stanton and Judge just have grown tight because they have similar profiles and positions and bodies. So I could see them forming an alliance. And then, who else do we have in there? I guess so. We're saying Torres and Sanchez are out at this point.
No, but they may not be the person that they're trying to vote for in this round.
Okay. Well, I would say the pitchers Cole and Chapman, and then Judge and Stanton have grown close. So
yeah. And so how is this team and these players, how have they stood up for each other over the last few years of being teammates?
Well, when you play for the New York Yankees, you're under a great deal of scrutiny, far more than any other team. And, you kind of have to stand up for each other, because otherwise it's just not going to work. You're going to fall apart. So they have. I mean, and you talk about Gary Sanchez, he's had a lot of struggles. And Garrett Cole made a point when he joined the Yankees this year to continually praise Gary Sanchez as his catcher until he wound up switching to Kyle Higashioka.
Yeah.
But even then, he made sure not to throw Gary Sanchez under the bus. So, yeah, because if you don't stand up for each other on the New York Yankees, it's going to lead to trouble.
And one of the things that many people talk about as being so difficult playing in New York is the media element to it. So at Tribal Council and Real Survivor, Jeff Probst asks some questions that, they just bring up interesting topics that sometimes can change the vote. So how is the media maybe changing the perception of maybe some of these or who they're voting for to eliminate?
Well, I will say this. I will say that Gary Sanchez kind of became a burden on the Yankees, in part because of the media's focus on him, because he really did struggle both hitting and defense. So it was almost daily, check-ins with the manager, with the other players, like what do you see going on with Gary? Was today a good day for Gary? Was today a setback for Gary? So I do think that was exhausting.
Yeah, so if we're seeing a pitchers and catchers alliance here, it looks like the pitchers and catchers might be on the bottom. And although Chapman won immunity in this challenge now, it looks like Sanchez might be the easy vote and other people are going to, I guess, gang up on him. What are your thoughts on who they're voting for?
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing the best I can here because I'm not a big Survivor fan. But yeah, all I can say is that unfortunately for the Yankees and for Gary Sanchez, he did become a distraction of sorts just because of his struggles. So if I'm following this right, it sounds like he could be a guy who could get voted on.
Yep. All right. So unfortunately for him, Gary Sanchez is voted off. 7-3 is the vote. And I mean, who Cole, Chapman, and Sanchez decide to vote for doesn't really matter here. All right. So now we're on to challenge number 2, and we're going down to a final 3, I guess, but we can kind of summarize some of the rounds together. So we'll do this round as voting out 2 people. So let's say this challenge is going to be a puzzle and maybe some physical activity at the beginning. So who on this team is smart? Who's the one the highest baseball IQ? I mean, I would have probably guessed Gary Sanchez being a catcher, but he's gone now. So who else on this team is going to fit that those traits?
I would say Aaron Judge has a very high baseball IQ, excellent baseball IQ. I would say Gio Urshela, third base, is just if you watch the way he plays the game, very high IQ. Garrett Cole studies the game like nobody else. He really just loves studying pitching and talking about pitching and engaging other people about pitching.
Yeah, and there's no question about either 3 of them if they're athletes and can definitely handle a challenge. So let's say that those 3 win immunity this round. And one of the things in Survivors that oftentimes people in similar situations will come together to form an alliance. So we may be starting to see some things moving around here, and we'll have Judge, Urshela, and Cole maybe starting to get a little closer here, maybe bringing Chapman along with them. So they need to bring one more person over to get the 5-4 advantage. So who else do you think that they're going to try to pull in with them? And again, that's Judge, Urshela, Cole, and Chapman.
Who else would they pull in? How about Stanton, just because he's so big?
Yeah, makes sense. Definitely very physically dominant alliance there. And to continue on in the game, looks like they may be winning a bunch of challenges. And the other players, Clint Frazier, LeMahieu, and Voit, they may be on the chopping block coming up. Now, here it's a bit of an interesting choice between LeMahieu, Voit, Frazier, and Gleyber Torres. So obviously, they're looking to take out some sort of threat, someone else that might win the game, someone else that might get the jury's votes. So out of those four, who's going to be more likely to perform in a challenge of any kind, mental or physical, or who's the biggest threat in this game?
Well, who's the biggest threat? Maybe Luke Voit, just because he's a very strong guy. If you just look at his arms, seen the footage of him lifting weights. So
yeah.
I could see him being a threat. He's also a very effervescent guy. I'm not sure if that could help his case as well, but I could see him being a threat.
Yeah, and also he's a very likable guy. Like especially this year, leading the AL in homers, somewhat out of nowhere, and he really gained a traction this year. And so in Survivor, the jury determines who wins. And I think Luke Voit would definitely be able to gather some votes. So I think that would be a smart decision for them to vote off Luke Voit. Next, coming up, let's say it's reorganized a little bit. So maybe it's Judge and Stanton are starting to stick together. And is there any chance that they bring in Clint Frazier, the other outfielder?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's say they bring in Clint Frazier with them. And now Urshela and LeMahieu, the two infielders, are kind of on the outs. So how do you think that they'll be able to maybe use their strengths or find other players' weaknesses to kind of work themselves back up in this game?
Well, DJ LeMahieu's biggest strength is just his mental approach to baseball. He's just so steady. He really doesn't get too up or down. They call him the machine. So I think that if he's dealt a setback here, he's not going to get really deterred by it. He's going to show up and keep trying.
Yeah, and for Shella, I definitely think about this year. He had an outstanding defensive year, several highlight plays, all the way from third base. And so, yeah, that challenge of the ball coming maybe a little further than expected hasn't really stopped him. So now Cole and Chapman, I mean, there's a lot going on here. But who's the odd man out in this group? Who's more likely to not? I mean, the Yankees, they all fit in with each other, but who here is more likely to maybe make someone mad, whether it's through a practical joke or something? Who's more likely to set enough people the wrong way to get him chopped off the island?
That's a really hard question, William. Yeah, I mean, no one. I think Clint Frazier, when he was younger, might have been most susceptible to that. But I think Clint has really grown up in the last year and change. So, yeah, I mean, it's a tough question to answer. I think these guys are a pretty tight knit, disciplined group.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And when it comes down to it, infielders and outfielders and the way that these alliances are just going to add up, I could definitely see them going for LeMahieu as definitely a strong mental game and also a physical threat for that matter, putting up spectacular numbers as a hitter for the Yankees. And that precision would definitely translate to challenges and Survivor. So it looks like LeMahieu is going to be gone now.
Okay.
All right. So now we're left with Garrett Cole, Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, Aroldis Chapman, Gleyber Torres, Clint Frazier, and Gio Urshela. So Urshela's looking again a little bit on the outs, losing his buddy in the infield. DJ LeMahieu kind of sticking with Gleyber a little bit. So some of these players have more experience than others. Chapman has a World Series ring. Some of the other players have more playoff experience than others. How do those differences kind of change the way, or maybe the feel in the clubhouse? Is there a feeling of hierarchy with experience?
Yeah, I think that's natural for any line of work, William. I mean, I in my line of work, experience factors significantly into the hierarchy. So yeah, you're talking about Chapman, and I guess he has a little more experience than Cole. Been doing it a little longer. And then I'm just trying to think of this group we have. Oh, Stanton's been doing this a long time. So yeah, Stanton, Chapman, and Cole are probably the three oldest, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So that is three of them. And then the other remaining players are Aaron Judge, Gleyber Torres, Frazier, and Urshela. So if we're looking at another challenge here, and maybe this one is, let's say, maybe a balance challenge, and I guess, yeah, like balance and endurance. I think we used that at the beginning also. And you mentioned Chapman. And the only other player that really pops out to me in a definitive way is Garrett Cole, because he's a starting pitcher. And by definition, a starting pitcher, they pitch as far as they can into the game in, I guess, a suitable manner for the situation of the game. So how else is endurance with these remaining 7 players? How are they going to perform in an endurance challenge?
Well, I think I think Judge is probably the next most athletic person on this list. So, I think he's capable of endurance. Yeah, as you said, Cole. Yeah, certainly there's an endurance factor, just in being able to pitch 7 innings or 8 or 9 innings. So, I could see him doing well in this.
Yep. So Cole, Judge, and Chapman, and you could also see Stanton in there. He's won several awards and led the league in several stats for several years now. So over the course of an 162 game season, I could also see Stanton coming in there. So now it seems like Gleyber, Clint Frazier, and Urshela are again kind of on the outs, maybe not as well fitting in, unfortunately for them, with some of these other, maybe not themes, but categorizations on this team. And out of those 3, Gleyber, Clint Frazier, and Urshela, who has the most potential to go far in their careers, or in this case, Survivor, and make it to the end goal, which is going to be the final 3?
Well, from a baseball perspective, if you're asking who has the highest ceiling, I think that would have to be Gleyber Torres. He's the youngest of these 3 guys, and arguably he's already done the most in his young career, and there certainly is a lot of room for improvement for him. So, yeah, if you look at it through that prism, I'd have to say Torres.
And this past year in the 2020 season, obviously very different from a normal season. And that's definitely benefited some players, and it's definitely hurt a lot of other players. And Gleyber hadn't necessarily had the season that many of us were expecting him to. And did that 60 game season kind of block his potential this year, and kind of maybe not getting fully into the groove?
I'm sure that was part of it, and I think the other factor was the position switch. He definitely did not have a great year at shortstop. First year as the Yankees' first string shortstop, and yeah, he's just not that smooth at the position. He's not that athletic or nimble as you would want a shortstop to be.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And in terms of baseball and how it's evolving, and you were talking about how Gleyber probably has the highest ceiling, and if if his defensive game isn't that strong, and obviously the way that baseball is moving, we're moving towards a bit of a home run or nothing, or home run or walk, really, type of game. And obviously the last great Yankees shortstop, Derek Jeter, he had fabulous defensive highlights. He was a fabulous defensive player, as well as contributing offensively, having a career batting average of like 310. And so how does the evolution of the game and where it is today in 2020, how does that change Gleyber's ceiling?
Well, he can hit for power. He can hit home runs, so that's very helpful. Yeah, I mean that you're right. The game has evolved, and home runs are a very desirable commodity, and he can provide them from a position that traditionally does not provide that many home runs.
Yeah, and how does he fit in with this lineup? Because obviously the Yankees have such strong players. Very fortunate compared to some of the other teams in the MLB that for Aaron Boone arranging that lineup, there's so many different ways that you could do it that you could all reason for in arguments argue for. And where do you see him maybe in the long run playing in the lineup?
Defensively, I mean, in the
Offensively.
Offensively, yeah, I mean, I think they would love for him to be a number 3 hitter. I think, or number 2 hitter. I think he has that kind of upside. He just needs to be a little more disciplined to get to that point.
We mentioned home run or walk, and his eye has gotten a bit better over the last year. Looking at his stats over from 2018 and 2019, playing over 120 games each year, having just 42 and 48 walks each year, which isn't as high as you might expect of a player of that caliber. But then this year, kind of maybe slacking off a little bit with the hitting, but he pulled in just 42 games, 22 walks. So he's definitely improving in ways, and I think he might start to see this coming for him in Survivor, but so might the other players, and I think that the other players might try to take advantage of this opportunity and vote him off. Yeah, oftentimes in Survivor, the strong players that would win the game if they made it to the final 3.
That makes sense.
A simple loss or flipping of the tables could really shake things up dramatically. And Gleyber Torres is a very strong player and athlete, someone you wouldn't necessarily expect to be gone or leave in this way, but it had to be someone. All right, so 6 players left: Garrett Cole, Aaron Judge, Stanton, Chapman, Clint Frazier, and Urshela. What is a sort of maybe a radical move in this game that Clint Frazier and Gio Urshela could pull out of the bag? What's something very interesting, and what grabs the hype in real life in the MLB?
Well, you're talking about 2 very different people right there. I mean, Clint Frazier loves being in the spotlight. He's huge on social media. I think he does kind of revel in the big moment. I think he gets excited in dramatic moments, and he's delivered in a few. Gio Urshela is a very quiet guy, not an attention-seeking guy. It's not to say he shrivels up in high-pressure situations. I don't think he does at all. But they just kind of approach it from 2 different ways.
Yeah, and I mean, I follow a lot of Yankees players on Instagram, and they really, compared to some other players on other teams, and especially other sports, definitely a little bit less on the social media side, which that does, even though they still have extreme personalities and are definitely a very fun team to follow. And maybe it's just a baseball thing in general, or a Yankees thing. But how do they, I guess maybe being a little more proper, as I put in air quotes, a little safer, not going to say anything crazy, not trying to make enemies. But Clint Frazier coming out, he's, a little more like that. And I think that Clint Frazier is going to be more likely to go in, play aggressive, and maybe find an advantage in the game of some sort. And so then out of, I guess, what you could call the power alliance, Garrett Cole, Aaron Judge, Stanton, and Chapman, out of those four, who's going to be most likely to flip on them, join Clint Frazier and Gio Urshela and kind of turn this game around and realign?
Gosh, I maybe Chapman. I'm not. I'm not. It's hard to really assess. I'm sorry.
Yeah, definitely a difficult hypothetical there.
Yeah.
You could say Garrett Cole obviously leaves the Astros for the Yankees, or you could say Chapman. He was dealt to Chicago, wins the World Series, half a year later back with the Yankees. So I would definitely say maybe between those two there. And I would also agree with Chapman, just a little more of a fireball. Maybe, he throws, or used to throw, like an 103-mile-an-hour fastball, and he's definitely playing aggressive. He's definitely going to play his cards in a very aggressive way, go all in. So I could see him out of those four flipping. So then out of Cole, Judge, and Stanton, who do you think that Chapman, Frazier, and Urshela could see as the biggest threat in this game? So at this point in the game, they're also looking at some social aspects to it, because at the end of the day, it's the jury and the people that have been voted off, which were, I believe, Sanchez, LeMahieu, Voit, and they're the ones that are going to be voting for the winner here. So out of those three, who's going to rack up the most votes? Because that's probably who Chapman, Frazier, and Urshela are going to be looking to gun off.
Well, I would say Aaron Judge is the team leader among this group. So I think he'll get a lot of support. So if you're talking about the biggest threat like that, I think it would probably be Judge.
Yeah, and how has he sort of come into this leadership role? Because playing a few games in August and September in 2016, he was as expected, and then comes into 2017, blasts 51 homers. And how has that evolved him into the leader in the clubhouse he is today?
Well, I think, first of all, you talk about that Rookie of the Year season, which was terrific. And when you do that in New York and you handle all the attention and scrutiny the way he did, that really gets you a lot of credibility in the clubhouse. And then in the subsequent years, yes, he has been injured a fair amount, which obviously is not what he wanted, but I think even the way he has dealt with all that adversity, just kind of, puts blinders on and goes straight ahead and understands all the questions and just deals with it. I think that that makes him a team leader.
Yeah, and you mentioned his injuries, and across this whole Yankees team, the last 2 years has been brutal with injuries. And I mean, you have to acknowledge it at some point. And out of any of these players that we've talked about today, how much could a potential injury set them back? Because like you were saying, Judge and his adversity and pushing through and finding a way to come back. And you can still see him in his prime when he's locked in. He is so good. And we saw that just a little bit at the end of this season. But who might fall really far behind due to an injury?
Well, I think Stanton is the most injury prone of this group. There's no doubt about that. I mean, he's barely been on the field the last 2 seasons.
Yeah. Yeah, and back to the vote though, I think Judge would definitely be the easy vote out. Chapman kind of turning or flipping the table and taking out a big threat in Aaron Judge. All right, so now we'll come in with the final five. They've made it halfway down from 10 to 5, just need to get it past 2 more votes to make it to the final 3 where the jury will vote for the winner. And so one other element of Survivor that we haven't talked about that much yet is finding advantages and hidden immunity idols to sort of to get past a vote for free if they feel they're in trouble. And maybe out of these players, who might be able to really search deep and find that hidden advantage or hidden immunity idol?
I would have to say Cole, because Cole is a guy who just searches and searches for advantages as a pitcher. Just he reads stuff, he talks to people, he's endlessly curious. So I think it sounds like he might be a good fit for that.
Yeah. So now if he and Stanton now are kind of in the minority here, but maybe Cole pulls something out of his back pocket and relevant to however the rest of this round goes, it looks like Stanton might be the odd man out unless he pulls through with a challenge victory. So how is Stanton's definitely physical attributes and overall characteristics, how might he be able to pull off this challenge win?
Well, Giancarlo Stanton is not someone you can out easily. He's been through a lot in his career. I don't know if you remember when he got hit in the head with a pitch by Mike Fiers. And that was a career-threatening injury.
Yeah.
But he fought back from that. And even though these last 2 years with the Yankees been really, really tough, he still came back for the playoffs this year and actually hit great. Hit a bunch of home runs to help the Yankees get as far as they did, which, of course, was nowhere as far as they wanted to go. He is not someone, even when he's down, he's not someone you count out.
And so if Stanton does pull out this victory in this challenge and let's say that Chapman, Frazier, and Urshela, they don't know that Cole has a hidden immunity idol and they're going to put all their votes on him. But those wouldn't count because of Cole's advantage, his idol. So now, who is Stanton and Cole maybe going to vote out here? They have Chapman, who flipped on them, but maybe they'll still honor him and remember their alliance and remember that they were good together. And then there's Clint Frazier and Gio Urshela a little bit further on the outside as well. So who are Cole and Stanton probably going to decide to get rid of?
Would they try to get rid of the biggest threat?
In this case, yeah, probably.
Okay.
But then you can also remember, like I was saying with Chapman, the social game to this, and like if Chapman betrays them, if Chapman, like when he went to Chicago in 2016, but then came right back at the start of 2017. So are they just going to welcome him back in and get rid of Frazier or Urshela, or is that just a reason to get rid of him now? Like, you turned on us, so bye.
Well, I would just say that Chapman is a threat because of his athleticism and his endurance and everything, his strength. So I'm sorry that I don't understand the game as well as you do,
Yep.
but that's what stands out to me.
Yep. All right. So Chapman, after a long run, he is the sixth player eliminated, and we're down to the final 4. here in this challenge, whoever wins in Survivor, they get to pick one person to take with them to the final three, and the other two compete in a fire making challenge. So there's a few different things that we can talk about with fire making. But first of all, with this Final Four challenge, it's often something with a lot of repetition. They've had challenges where there's different like marble mazes and stuff, and you just have to be ready and keep your head in the game and keep on going. So in terms of keeping your head in the game in this final challenge, who out of these four stands out the most and the least to you?
Well, Urshela, I would say the most, just because as a third baseman, you always have to stay alert, right? Because the ball gets to you so quickly, and you have such little time to react and then to make a play. So I that's what I would say about Urshela.
And the other person that stands out to me, at least, is Garrett Cole. Just being a starting pitcher, you have to, or the job comes along with so many other parts, such as, Garrett Cole's pitching for 7 innings straight, maybe, or he'll just keep on going. He'll just keep nailing in the nice fastballs and sliders and breaking balls. So yeah, we'll go with Urshela for this one, and it seems like he'll probably be bringing along Clint Frazier, who he's sort of been working together with for the last few rounds. And then there's Cole and Stanton in a fire making challenge. And some of the things in Survivor, at least in their fire making challenges, is that there's a rope with a flag. You have to build a fire on this little table that burns through the rope. And one of the things that happens on that day leading up to that fire making challenge is that they'll prepare. So we'll talk about 2 different categories here with the fire making: preparing, and then second of all, execution. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much you prepare if you don't succeed. So out of those 2 categories between Cole and Stanton, who's gonna burn through the rope first?
Gosh, that's a tough one because Stan grew up in Los Angeles and Cole grew up in Orange County, California. So I don't think either of them has much experience with fire and ropes or anything like that. I think it's a very close call.
So how did their positions, obviously Garrett Cole being a starting pitcher and Stanton being really a DH, not needing as much on the defensive end, which is literally half the game. So how do the attributes of those 2 positions and what they entail, how is that going to shape our perception of their preparing and execution?
Yeah, I mean, I think both prepare for their jobs very well. I mean, Garrett Cole really prides himself on being fully prepared as a pitcher and being prepared not only overpower but outsmart opposing batters. And then Giancarlo Stanton has to prepare a great amount because of all the injuries he's had. Because if he doesn't prepare intelligently, he's going to get injured again. So he really takes a lot of pride in doing all his work that he has to do before the game even starts.
And one thing that I also noticed about Garrett Cole, I just pulled up his batting stats because, as a pitcher, you are playing, just defensively in the AL. But he was on Pittsburgh for 5 years. And although obviously no one's going to get mad at him for not hitting well, but in terms of that being prepared and playing well, he batted 206, 174, 150, 200, and 164, which for a pitcher is very good.
Yeah.
And just translating that ability from defense to offense of being prepared, knowing what's going on, having an idea of what's coming at him. I think that he's going to be able to pull through in this situation.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can understand that. Yeah, I'd say Garrett Cole at this point has more a larger skill set than Giancarlo Stanton. Giancarlo Stanton really has been worn down somewhat by all the injuries he's suffered.
Yep. All right. So now we have the final vote, which would be the jury's job. And in the final tribal council in Survivor, each player makes their case for 3 categories: outwit, outlast, and outplay. So we'll start off with outwit for these 3 players: Garrett Cole, Clint Frazier, and Gio Urshela. And we're just remembering that the votes they're trying to get are Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, Voit, DJ LeMahieu, Chapman, Gleyber Torres, and Sanchez.
So outwit, I would probably go with Cole, just because he, I think he's a very savvy person, a very polished person, and very smooth operator. So that's what I would go with.
Yeah, and you definitely hear about him being a very prepared person, definitely going in to study the film or talking with coaches. And so then outwit and outplay. So this usually happens with the challenges and all the different social elements of the game. So Clint Frazier and Gio Urshela, they've sort of played from the bottom and moved up. Garrett Cole kind of started at the top and lost some allies as the game progressed. So in terms of outplay, who would you vote for here?
Well, yeah, I would say I might say Clint Frazier. Because he came in as the least experienced baseball player among this group, at least from a major league perspective, at least major league time. He was apparently survived pretty well to this point.
Yeah, right. And so then into this last category here, outlast. So for outlast, it generally has to also do a little bit with the social game, maneuvering their way through to the end, which could go to either side here. But now let's sort of try to walk through maybe the jury's perspective here. So we have Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton, who they worked with Cole, and there's a good chance that they're both going to be voting for them. But then there's Luke Voit, who didn't make it too far in this game. And whether it's out of real life relationships with those players or whether it's just respect for talent, where could you see Luke Voit going with this vote?
Gosh, that's a really tough question, William. And it's Cole, Urshela, Frazier.
Yep.
Maybe Urshela, just because they're both infielders.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, with so many of these players, like the Yankees, they're all such a tight group for the most part, and sometimes it can be just hard to find these maybe little groups inside of the group besides just the generalization of what position they are. And there definitely is a bond there.
Yes.
All right, so now with DJ LeMahieu and we'll go Chapman and Sanchez, a pitcher and a catcher. Could you see them breaking the bias with Cole and flipping maybe to Frazier or Urshela, especially because if we remember, Chapman sort of flip-flopped between alliances midway through, leaving Cole and heading for Frazier and Urshela.
Right, but I think at the end you will side with your fellow pitcher in Chapman's case, and I think Cole really tried to do right by Sanchez last year, so I could see Sanchez voting for Cole as well.
Yeah. All right. So now coming back to, I believe it's the final vote. So then DJ LeMahieu, who he could either stick with a bit of the infield and go with Gio Urshela, or he could go to Clint Frazier, a respect for talent, or just go with Cole, who is another major leader for the Yankees.
Yeah, I think I have to keep going with, generally guys will side with their position. So I would say DJ would vote for Urshela.
Yep, definitely. So the final vote tallies up to, I believe it was 5 for Cole, 2 for Urshela, and none for Clint Frazier. And these votes, oftentimes, they're not who to rank second place in these is very hard, because at the end of the day, you don't know who those 5 votes for Cole between Frazier and Urshela would have gone to. So I think Cole is our winner here today on the Substantiate podcast. Garrett Cole winning the Yankees Players Playing Survivor. So now who's going to take home the silver medal, though, between Frazier and Urshela? And this could just be your bias.
I mean, I guess I just think Frazier would have to get a lot of credit for hanging in there as long as he did, given that, we talked earlier about the hierarchy of experience, and he has the least major league experience playing baseball. So I think for him to make it this far could get him some additional respect.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. And just unfortunately for Urshela, what kind of went wrong there for him in terms of maybe how he was perceived in this game, maybe how his he and Frazier played the game fairly similarly here today in terms of alliance. But yeah, you said what gave Frazier the leg up, but was there anything specific that gave Urshela, I guess, a leg down?
No, Gio Urshela is a great guy, and we talked earlier about just what it takes to succeed at third base, and just always being ready and nimble, and it seems like it helped him to get this far. But someone has to finish third, right?
Yep. The bronze medal, 3 out of 10. So the final rankings, I guess, would be Cole, Frazier, and then Urshela, and everyone else that was voted out previously. So that's going to do it for this week's episode of Substantiate. And come back next week for another episode, and follow us on social media at substantiatepod, and share this podcast with a friend. Thank you for coming on today, Ken.
Thanks for having me, William.
Is there anything else that you'd like to say before we wrap up this recording?
No, just this is a very clever idea, and keep up the great work.
Thank you. All right, go Yankees. Thank you for listening to this episode of Substantiate. The best way to help support the show is to, number 1, tell your friends about Substantiate. That is the number 1 way to support us. The second way is to leave us a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. Number 3, follow us at substantiatepod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Hello, I'm Anthony.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
And we're hosts of Capes on the Couch, the podcast where comics get counseling.
Superheroes don't always get to go home happy. That's where we come in.
We offer psychiatric and mental health analysis of comic book characters.
So check us out at capesonthecouch.live and across all social media platforms at Capes on the Couch.